There are models who just strut, supermodels who absolutely slay, and then there are icons who leave their marks, etching themselves into the fashion world forever. Today, we're diving into Gia Carangi, the Philly girl who didn't just walk into the fashion world, she kicked the door down, carved her name into the desk, and made everyone else look like they were just playing dress up. Plenty of people consider her as the first true supermodel. Others see her as this untouchable icon. And yeah, a few just remember her as that tragic model who couldn't escape her demons. But one thing's for sure, Gia didn't just spark the heroin chic trend, she was the movement before the world even had the words for it. With that dark hair, killer eyes, and an attitude that screamed, "I'm not here to play nice." Her raw, edgy beauty forced the industry to rethink what beautiful could be, and because of her, Cindy Crawford had a paved way into the industry due to her resemblance to Gia, earning the nickname Baby Gia. And let's not forget, Angelina Jolie won her first Golden Globe for portraying Gia in the biopic about her life. So, what made this Philly girl so unforgettable that they made movies, wrote books, and still talk about her almost 40 years after her death? Was it her attitude, her fearless style, or the way she challenged everything from beauty standards, her bold sexuality, to her own demons? To understand all that, we've got to go back to the start. A gritty Philly neighborhood in 1960, far from the glitz of fashion. Gia Marie Carangi came into the world on January 29, 1960, born to parents of Italian and Irish descent. Her dad, Joe, ran a chain of hoagie shops. Little Gia worked behind the counter, slinging sandwiches before she ever served looks. Her mom, Kathleen, was a homemaker, the youngest of three with two older brothers, Michael and Joe Jr. Her home life? Chaotic doesn't even begin to cover it. Her parents had one of those toxic, explosive relationships that leave scars on everyone involved. Joe was controlling and jealous. Kathleen, Gia's mom, was young, restless, and increasingly distant. One terrifying moment came when Joe accused her of cheating and tried to inspect her body for signs. That broke her. Kathleen left soon after. She said later, "He was going to kill me, or I was going to kill him. I thought maybe I should have stayed for the kids, but leaving them with him was the only way out." Gia was 11 when her mom walked out. What does that do to a kid? Her brothers said the house turned into chaos. No rules, no structure. Michael put it plainly, Gia was the youngest. The breakup affected her the worst, and I feel girls need more attention than boys anyhow. Gia's Aunt Nancy also commented on the impact of the divorce, saying she couldn't understand why her mother had left, why her parents weren't together. I don't think she ever understood it, and she was totally unsupervised. Gia herself felt isolated as the only girl in the family. She later wrote about her childhood and her father, saying, "My dad was always working, and when he was home, he gave my brothers all his attention. I'd try to get him to notice me, and he'd tear me down in front of them. I felt like they were better because they were boys. He never gave me what I needed: love, time." She'd sneak into her parents' closet to play dress up, but not in her mom's stuff. She'd try on her dad's or brother's clothes, thinking, if I were a boy, maybe he'd love me. That rejection, that hunger for connection, it shaped everything. It turned Gia into a tomboy, maybe to get her dad's approval, maybe to shield herself from the pain. She hoped her mom would come back, but when Kathleen remarried a year later, Gia's dream of a stable family shattered. She bounced between her parents' houses as a teen, never feeling at home anywhere. But in that chaos, Gia found her tribe with the Bowie Kids, a crew obsessed with David Bowie's androgynous style and open sexuality. She chopped her hair, rocked men's clothes, and owned her queerness at a time when that could get you ostracized. A friend later said, "Gia was the purest lesbian I ever met. She was sending girls flowers at 13. However, her mom wasn't having it." Kathleen found a love letter Gia wrote to a girl while snooping for drugs and sent her to a counselor to fix her, because apparently love was the problem. Even then, Gia's beauty was undeniable. By her early teens, she was turning heads. In 1974, at her stepdad's cabin party, one of his clients, a guy known for dating models, spotted Gia and said she had potential. He set up her first shoot with Philly photographer Joe Petrellis. At 14, Gia posed for outdoor shots. Nothing came of it right away, but the seed was planted. Fast forward 2 years, and that quiet beginning got loud. At 16, Gia was a regular at Philly's gay clubs. Bold, magnetic, impossible to miss. That's where her striking presence caught the eye of Maurice Tannenbaum, a hairstylist and aspiring photographer. He asked her to pose for him right there on the dance floor, a moment that changed everything. In the fall of 1977, Maurice brought on a makeup artist named Sandra Circa to work at his salon. One day, he casually shows her his portfolio, probably thinking nothing of it, until Sandra flips to a photo of this girl, Gia, and she knew this girl was about to be it. So what does Sandra do? She calls up her good friend Wilhelmina Cooper, the modeling legend who had her own agency in New York, and basically tells her, stop everything. You have to meet this girl. 3 days later, Maurice and Sandra brought Gia and her mom Kathleen up to New York to meet the one and only Wilhelmina Cooper. Oh, and quick clarification if you've seen the Gia movie with Angelina Jolie. In the film, they show Gia going to New York with just a friend, but according to Thing of Beauty by Stephen Fried, yep, I bought the book just to get the story right. She actually went with Maurice, Sandra, and her mom Kathleen. And fun fact, I actually saved money buying that book thanks to Cooper. This free browser extension that automatically finds and applies the best coupons while you shop online, it's like my favorite little hack. You just install it, make a free account, browse your favorite stores, and when you're ready to check out, just click the little Cooper button and watch the savings happen in real time. It's supported on all the major browsers like Chrome, Edge, Opera, Firefox, and Safari, so it works for pretty much everyone. And Cooper partners with over 200,000 merchants globally, including places like Walmart, Target, Sephora, and Macy's. It even offers cashback rewards and price comparisons, so you can make smarter shopping choices without wasting time hunting for deals. If you're curious, the link's sitting right at the top of the description. Click it, install it for free, and thank me later. Now, 3 days later, Maurice and Sandra brought Gia and her mom Kathleen up to New York to meet the one and only Wilhelmina Cooper. And let me tell you, Gia wasn't rolling in with Chanel pumps and a fresh blowout. Nope. She shows up in her usual uniform, ripped jeans, cowboy boots, zero makeup, and a whole lot of attitude. Gia wasn't your typical model. She didn't do polished, she did real. And oh, did I mention? She also casually carried a switchblade. Now get this. She walks into Wilhelmina's agency, pulls out that very switchblade, and carves her name into the receptionist's desk. Like full-blown Gia was here energy. And Wilhelmina, instantly obsessed. As they're walking out, she turns to Sandra and says, "Make sure it gets signed." And just like that, by January 1978, Gia officially becomes a Wilhelmina model. A month later, Gia made the move to New York. Crashing at the Barbizon Hotel, basically the spot for fresh-faced models, before moving into an apartment with her lover and close friend, Suzanne Rodier. Just imagine it, 18 years old, brand new to the city, no family, no structure, just vibes and big dreams. You already know where this is going. Her first test shoot at Wilhelmina's agency? A full-blown panic moment. Gia felt completely out of place surrounded by the typical blonde, blue-eyed, cookie-cutter models. With her olive skin, jet black hair, and that sharp, androgynous look, she was the opposite of what the industry was used to. But Sandra Circa, the makeup artist who'd believed in her from day one, saw the fear on Gia's face. So she stepped in, calmed her down, had her breathe, and told her to really look in the mirror. And then it happened. Sandra picked up her camera, Gia leaned into that mirror. Click. That was the moment she captured what would be known as the face. The shot that didn't just launch a career, it shook the entire industry. After wrapping her test shoots, Gia dove straight into her first go-sees. You know, those model meet and greets where you basically audition with your face. And it didn't take long. Within just a month, she landed her first paid gig with Wilhelmina, a shoot for Ambience magazine. A week after that, Gia walked into photographer Lance Stadler's studio for what was supposed to be just another shoot. But this one hit different. Stadler handed Gia his own black leather jacket, no shirt underneath, just black pants, that signature intense stare, and a thick smoky eye that made the black and white shots pop. It was gritty, raw, and in an era obsessed with clean-cut beauty, it was a total curveball. And Gia, she didn't just pull it off, she made it iconic. Those black and white grunge-leaning shots would end up launching her career. Her mix of feminine and masculine energy was a game changer in the late 70s and early 80s. Photographers were obsessed with her street smart vibe, always in jeans and leather, topped with that audacious beauty. Her style was so ahead of its time that even legends took notice. During a shoot with Francesco Scavollo for none other than Diana Ross, they asked Gia if they could borrow her shredded, lived-in jeans to complete the look. They were perfect, authentic, raw, effortless. After the shoot, Diana Ross turned to Gia and asked if she could keep them. Gia didn't even flinch. "No," she said, just like that. She told Diana Ross, the actual icon, "You can't have my pants." That was Gia. She didn't follow trends. She was the trend. Top photographers couldn't get enough. Scavollo said, "There's only been maybe 3 girls in my whole career that have walked into my studio and I went, wow." Gia was the last who came in here and I said, wow. She quickly became a favorite for names like Arthur Elgort and especially Chris von Wangenheim, whose edgy, provocative style would lead to some of Gia's most iconic and most intimate moments on camera. And it was during one of those early shoots with Chris that Gia crossed paths with the woman who'd become a key figure in her life, makeup artist Sandy Linter. Sandy first met Gia in 1978, and let's just say Gia made an entrance.
Made such an impression because the girls I was working with that day and just came in, and they were these pretty, cute, sweet girls, and we made them up and everything, and she came in, and all of a sudden I had these black punk glasses on that day, wraparound kind of weird punk glasses. All of a sudden I see this girl's come in, she's got her feet up on the table, she's smoking, and she's wearing my glasses. And I just turn around and look at her, and I mean, she had presence, enormous presence. And I was furious with her because she slapped on some ugly kind of cheap foundation. And I remember thinking, why'd she do that? Doesn't she trust me to be able to do her makeup? So I got a little uptight with her.
The shoot that followed was with Von Wangenheim. After the shoot, he invited Gia to stay on and do some nude work, which she agreed to. One of the most famous results of this session was the series known as The Girl Behind the Fence. After finishing the shoot, Gia accepted Von Wangenheim's invitation to remain on to do some nude work. Sandy recalled packing up her makeup, ready to leave, when Chris came back into the room. He asked me, "I'm doing a personal photo, will you do it?" I agreed, and he came back and said, "With Gia?" I said okay again. He left the room only to come right back with another question. Nude? I was freaking out a bit. What did I get myself into? I had just come back from a summer at Fire Island Pines, where we were all mostly nude or topless. It was 1978. I just told him I would keep my boots on because I was so short, and that would make me feel better. Here's how Sandy remembered it.
So here we are, we're both nude, we're both climbing this fence, the music is blaring, we're dancing, we're being photographed, we're feeling fabulous, we're looking gorgeous and all this and that. But she was thinking I was meaning it, which I was doing something. In those days I used to get in front of any camera, just jump in front of the camera and act out scenes. At the end of the day I took my makeup off and went home. And she went home and called me up and said, "Would you like to go for a ride in my car?" All of a sudden I went, wait a minute. Did she think I meant anything? I said, "Gia, I really like you and everything. You're beautiful." I said, "But I don't like women like that." And I could tell when I was giving her the answer, she was blowing it off already. She didn't take any notice of anything I was saying. She said, "Oh, I have this great car," or something. I don't know what she said, but it was like really like a 19-year-old kid would say to her. I mean, I was like 29 or whatever. And I just thought, oh my God, this isn't happening. And then sure enough, that night or the next day, I got roses. And I was, ooh, now what do I do? To me, it was funny, but Gia had no sense of humor about anything like this.
Eventually, though, she did go out with her. Because honestly, how do you say no to Gia? By the end of 1978, Gia was everywhere. Versace, Dior, Yves Saint Laurent, everyone wanted her. She wasn't just landing jobs, she was owning covers. Vogue, Cosmopolitan, back to back. At her peak, she was pulling in $10,000 a day. Not bad for a girl who just months before was folding hoagies behind a Philly counter. Gia's unique look, raw energy, and undeniable presence made her a sensation, and she was at the top of her game. But it wasn't just her striking looks or her ability to push boundaries that made her blow up. Gia had something different. She was one of the first supermodels to create unique poses and gestures for the camera, setting her apart from her peers. At this point, Carangi was so iconic in modeling circles that she was known simply by her first name, Gia. But while she ruled the fashion world by day, she dove into New York's nightlife by night. Studio 54, the Mud Club, the velvet ropes, the glitter, the drugs. At first, it was all just part of the scene. White powder, pills, the usual party favors. But then March 1980 hit, and everything changed. Wilhelmina Cooper, her agent, her rock, the woman who believed in her from day one, died of lung cancer. It shattered Gia. The one stable maternal figure in her life was gone. And in that grief, she reached for something darker. At first, it seemed like Gia was managing it. She still landed covers, still booked jobs. She even showed up dancing in Blondie's Atomic video, like nothing was wrong. But behind the camera, everything was wrong. She started showing up to shoots late, or not at all. And when she did show up, she was often high. One time, she passed out mid-shoot with a lit cigarette in her hand. Another time, she bailed halfway through a session to go score, still wearing a $10,000 Versace dress. And then there was the Richard Avedon shoot. A full TV crew waiting, lights up, cameras ready. Gia was the star. Avedon was directing. Everyone was counting on her. She never showed. That job paid $5,000. Rosie Vella took her spot. Scavello remembered a shoot where Gia broke down crying, not because she was overwhelmed by work, but because she couldn't find any drugs that day. Let me tell you something about the fashion industry. They'll tolerate your demons as long as you're making them money. Photographers knew Gia was using, but she was magic on camera, so they kept booking her, until they couldn't ignore it anymore. In Vogue's November 1980 issue, her track marks were visible. Even after airbrushing, they couldn't fully erase the damage. Vogue later admitted it outright. Carangi's track marks were visible even after airbrushing. The issue stirred up serious controversy, but let that sink in for a second. She was so captivating, so damn good, they published the photos anyway. That's how much the industry needed Gia. By 1981, her beauty couldn't save her career. She was dropped by her agency and went back to Philly to get clean. She enrolled in a 21-day detox program, but that winter, she fell into a toxic relationship with a 20-year-old heroin-addicted college student, Rochelle. Her brother Michael later told E, "I always suspected Rochelle was into heroin. She even offered me some once. It was a wild on and off relationship." And wild it was. Under Rochelle's influence, Gia slipped even further away from recovery. In the spring of 1981, 21-year-old Gia was arrested for drunk driving, then caught stealing from her own family and friends. By June, she left her mother's house and was crashing with friends. Rock bottom was getting lower by the day. Still, Gia tried again. She checked back into detox, but her attempt at sobriety was cut short by news that close friend photographer Chris von Wangenheim was killed in a car accident. It was the excuse Gia was looking for to go on a binge. She locked herself in her bathroom and spent hours shooting. It wasn't just a relapse. It was a full-blown surrender. Years of drug abuse had taken a brutal toll. Gia's once flawless skin now bore the scars, an ugly abscess on her hand, track marks up and down her arms, cysts across her back. She didn't look like the Gia who once ruled fashion. She looked like someone fighting for her life. By fall of 1981, Gia was back in yet another drug treatment program, trying desperately to keep her head above water. She'd put on weight. She looked worn down. The spark that once lit up every camera lens was dimming, but she hadn't fully let go. Not yet. She still believed she could pull off a comeback. She still wanted to return to New York, to modeling, to something that felt like purpose. So she reached out to Monique Pillard. Monique remembered. She was sitting in my chair and I said, "Gia, I want to represent you so badly, but I keep hearing all these horror stories." Then she asked the question everyone was too afraid to ask. "Why are you wearing such a long shirt? Can I see your arms?" Gia didn't flinch. She grabbed the sleeves and said firmly, "No. Do you want to represent me or not?" Despite the rumors, despite the scars Gia was hiding, Monique said yes. Gia stayed in Philly, continued her treatment, and only traveled to New York when a booking came through. But it wasn't easy. Most clients didn't want to take the risk, so she turned to an old friend, Francesco Scavollo. He gave her a Cosmo cover shot in the winter of 1982. It would be her final magazine cover. Scavollo later said,
"It made me very sad. I had a tough time that day, and because I really wanted it to be her best cover, and it wasn't. And it couldn't be. And no matter how hard I tried, it just couldn't happen. That wonderful spirit, that wonderful thing that she had was gone."
Some said her arms were tucked behind her back in the shot to hide her track marks. Scavollo denied it, claiming the pose was just to flatter her figure. But the truth was written all over the photo. She wasn't the same girl anymore. That same year, Gia made what would be her only TV appearance, an interview for ABC's 2020. Elite model management had convinced her to participate, hoping it would rebuild her image and shine a light on both the glamour and the darker sides of modeling. But instead of helping her, the interview ended up doing the opposite. On camera, Gia tried to keep it together. What you're about to see was supposed to be proof that she was back on track, but what unfolded was something much more complicated. It started off light. The host asked her how she got into modeling. She smiled, gave a calm, almost casual answer.
I started working with very good people, and a lot of work, all the time, very fast. I didn't build into a model. I just sort of became one.
On the surface, it felt like the beginning of a redemption arc, but then the mood shifts. The questions get serious, the kind of serious you can't dodge with charm.
At one point, you got kind of into the drug scene, didn't you?
Yes, you could say that I did. It kind of creeps up on you and catches you in a world that's, none that anyone will ever know except someone that has been there.
You're free of it, aren't you now?
Oh, yes, I am, definitely. I wouldn't be here right now talking to you if I wasn't.
Are you happy with your success?
Yes, I am.
You hesitated.
Well, I just wanted to think about it. No, I am happy with it.
And suddenly you can see it. The hesitation, the weight behind her eyes, the cracks in her voice. She said she was clean, said she was happy. But to anyone really watching, it was obvious. Gia was struggling. Hard. One industry insider later said, "She said she wasn't using, but how she looked and how she sounded told a different story." The interview didn't launch a comeback. It quietly confirmed what so many in the industry already feared. She wasn't coming back. By 1983, it was official. Her modeling career was over. She was caught with drugs on a shoot in North Africa and sent home. Under pressure from her family, Gia entered yet another rehab program, this time at Eagleville Hospital in Montgomery County. This wasn't about booking gigs anymore. This was about staying alive. And in that space, stripped of the cameras, the covers, the chaos, Gia finally let some of her truth slip out. She told staff she'd turned tricks for drug money, that she'd been raped by a dealer. These weren't just scars on her arms. These were wounds most people never saw. But even in the middle of that darkness, she was reaching for something more. Gia started looking into film schools in Philadelphia, and her interest in documentary photography and cinematography, that wasn't new. She'd even signed up for a photography course at New York University back when she was still modeling, trying to find something real behind all the artifice. But her schedule got in the way and she had to drop out. Still, the dream stuck. In a 1982 interview, Gia said on camera, "I'm going to school for cinematography, and I plan to make a big splash in film someday."
And I plan to make a big splash in film someday with my films as a cinematographer. My favorite cinematographer is Vittorio Storello, is his name?
She wasn't just trying to escape modeling. She was chasing a future where she was the one telling the story, not just the face of someone else's. So by 1985, after years of false starts and relapses, Gia finally managed to get clean. This time, it worked. She stayed sober for 7 months, got a job selling jeans at a mall, tried to live a quiet, normal life. She was rebuilding, slowly, quietly, without the spotlight. But by the winter of 1986, things started to feel off. Her skin broke out in strange rashes. She noticed flakes in her ear, pain in her feet, and Gia, always curious, always searching for answers, began clipping newspaper articles about a terrifying new illness that was just starting to make headlines: AIDS. On Memorial Day, she told her mother, "Mommy, I really have something wrong with me." But Kathleen didn't believe her. Alone, terrified, and spiraling, Gia attempted to escape everything with one final hit. She survived, but barely. She ended up in Warminster General Hospital with bilateral pneumonia. That's where they ran the tests. That's where her worst fear was confirmed. Gia was HIV positive. Remember, this was 1986. AIDS was still seen as a gay man's disease. Gia became one of the first famous women to be diagnosed with AIDS, likely contracted from sharing needles. The hospital staff were so uninformed about the disease that some wore spacesuits before entering her room and wiped down her phone every time she used it. On October 18, 1986, she was admitted to Hahnemann University Hospital. Her doctor, Wilbur Oakes, later said, "She was one of the very first AIDS patients we had, certainly the first woman." By the time she arrived, her personality was strange. She was pretty much sociopathic at that point. She looked like she'd been through a hell of a lot. And he wasn't wrong. 1 month later, on November 18, 1986, Gia Carangi died of AIDS-related complications. She was 26. And the most heartbreaking part? No one from the fashion industry came to her funeral. Not a photographer, not a designer, not one editor. The very world that had celebrated her beauty, profited off her face, and built campaigns around her image was completely silent when she needed them most. But there was one who never forgot her. Weeks later, fashion photographer Francesco Scavullo, her longtime friend and one of the few who truly cared, sent a mass card when he found out she had passed. He was in shock. "She had a fabulous appeal to me, and I always took care of her. I used to cook for her, make sure she ate. I always wanted to make her very happy, because she gave so much to me when we worked together. There was something she had. No other girl has got it. I've never met a girl who had it. Even after she was missing appointments with everybody else, she never missed one with me. Most girls stay in the business until they fade." Gia disappeared at her peak. I don't think she was a victim of the industry. She was a victim of herself. But that's just one side of it, isn't it? Maybe Gia's story didn't end with her death because she left too soon. Or maybe because no one wanted to take the blame for what she became. We love a hero's rise, but let's be honest, we're also drawn to their fall. It was easier to blame Gia than to admit the world failed her. Easier to point fingers at the addiction than to ask what she was trying so hard to forget. Drugs didn't destroy Gia. They numbed the pain of knowing she might never be truly loved. They gave her something to hold on to when she stood in a room full of polished blondes, feeling like she didn't belong. But she stayed, and she carved space for girls like Cindy Crawford. She made androgyny beautiful. She made queerness visible. She wasn't echoing trends. She was the moment. And long before the world had the language for it, Gia was lesbian chic, and her death, as tragic as it was, it put a human face on AIDS when society still wanted to pretend it didn't exist. But what truly made Gia unforgettable wasn't just what she wore or how she moved, it was who she was. In an industry built on illusion, she was painfully, unapologetically real. She showed us what happens when someone gives everything just to be seen and still ends up invisible. And that kind of legacy, it doesn't fade. The fashion world may have tried to forget her, but we didn't. And before you dip, quick question for my fashion fam. Which of today's models give you that Gia energy? Drop some names. I'm judging harder than Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada.